Hello and welcome to our Selective Mutism training session. This is particularly aimed at teachers and school staff, but might also include parents and family members who may want to have a recap on the Selective Mutism training that we offer as part of our speech and language department. My name's Cheryl Hughes and I'm a speech and language therapist at Northern Lincolnshire and Gould Hospitals NHS Trust, and I work with children with selective mutism. So we're going to follow through a PowerPoint. There will be some exercises that go along with this, so please do grab a pen and paper and I will ask you to pause the video. I think there's 3 exercises throughout this 45-minute session. If you have questions, there is an email address that you can contact us at the end if you have further questions you'd like to ask us. So off we go. What are we going to be covering as part of this course? What is selective mutism? How does it present in children? What are the common causes of selective mutism? What does speech therapists do as part of our package of care and involvement with children? And then what can you do to help as a teacher, as a teaching assistant, or as a parent or family member, or maybe a family friend? So exercise 1 already, have pen and paper to hand and consider pausing this video to give yourself time to read through 4 different scenarios. There's only a brief bit of information for each scenario. These are all made up, children, but I'd like you to have a think about whether you think that child has selective mutism or not, or maybe what further information you'd want to have. So pause the video and have a go. Okay, let's have a look at Billy. Billy is aged 4 and is quite shy for his first few weeks of school and prefers only to talk to his friends. Do you think you would consider that an example of selective mutism? We've put no, and our reason for that is actually lots of children are quite shy when they first start school, and it's quite normal for children to be more confident perhaps talking to their friends and away from adults, and actually we'd want to give it a little bit more time for Billy to settle into school and see how he gets along before we'd consider it a referral perhaps to speech therapy about possible selective mutism. Okay, next one. Katie, age 5, talks to her mum and her friends in the playground, but never talks to or in front of adults in school, even after the first term. So for this we've put yes, actually we consider this could be selective mutism. Obviously we'd want to do some further assessments of how Katie's getting on with her language, whether she shows any other signs of anxiety in other situations, but it is unusual for children to chat freely in one situation but then completely clam up when they're in school, particularly after they've been given time to settle in. Susie, age 6, nods her head and gives single word answers but never talks to anyone other than this. We've again put yes, we'd want to consider if this is selective mutism. So even though she's talking sometimes, she's not talking freely in school and she's very quiet otherwise. So some children will try and be a bit compliant, they'll force themselves to nod or give a little answer, but actually they're not feeling comfortable enough to talk in a free way. So we would want to look at that situation. And then finally, Nina, who's 8, arrives from Latvia and doesn't speak any English and won't talk or try to say words. We've put no. It's unlikely that this is selective mutism because actually it's more likely that seeing as she's only just arrived and she's expected to speak a new language, actually we'd expect to give that a few more months first, and it's quite common for children when they're exposed to a new language to want to listen to it first and take it all in and start to understand before they have the confidence to try and say anything. So I hope you did okay on that, but don't worry if you didn't. So what is selective mutism? It's children who want to speak but are unable to in specific social situations. And it can go as far as actually they don't feel comfortable enough to laugh or cough or cry. And it might even extend to non-verbal communication, so they might not feel comfortable being able to point or do gestures or actions. Maybe even nodding and shaking their head is too much for them. It's a speech phobia. They're afraid of the act of speaking and of somebody hearing their voice. It is an anxiety disorder rather than a specific speech and language disorder. So it's usual that children will have good speech and language skills when they're talking to people at home or in situations where they do feel comfortable to talk, but actually they have an anxiety about using their voice in other social situations. So obviously it could be quite a hidden disability because people might not realise what's going on or what's wrong. And they can become increasingly wary of any form of communication. So with the examples given of coughing or laughing or pointing or doing gestures. And at the bottom there, it's different to when a child enters a new country or starts a new school. It has to be something that's gone on for a few months for us to consider whether it's selective mutism. So I would highly recommend you get information from other sources as well as from our training video today. So there are some very good YouTube clips. There's one in particular from the BBC, which is called Help Me to Speak, Selective Mutism, and you can search that on YouTube. And the website www.selectivemutism.org is the one for the national UK charity Selective Mutism Information and Research Association, which has downloadable information leaflets and advice for parents and schools. So exercise 2, pen and paper at the ready again. Spend just a few moments thinking of something you are afraid of. So that could be spiders, it could be a fear of going out, it could be a fear of fierce dogs, or it could be something that doesn't seem rational to anybody else at all, but something that you find frightening. Think about how it makes you feel, how your body reacts in that situation, and how your mind reacts in that situation. Pause the video and just make a few notes on your paper. So when I think about these things, I think particularly about spiders, giant spiders in the bath. How does it make me feel? Obviously, my initial reaction will be I'm scared. I don't know what to do. Is there anyone else in the house I can shout to help me? What could I consider doing? Can I just avoid the situation? Maybe I'm just not going to go in there. I'm not really a freeze person. I'm probably more a flight. I'll get out of the way. I'll get out of that situation if I can. If I was already stuck in the bathroom and there it was, I might wonder about what my exit might be. And your mind starts to race. So you stop thinking about what you were supposed to be doing, and all you can think about is the spider that you can see in the corner. So just as a bit of an example, there's some common symptoms of anxiety. So you get body tension, you immediately tense up. People might have a blank facial expression. There is avoidance. People will try and get out of situations that make them feel uncomfortable. And that might include, for our children with selective mutism, avoiding eye contact. We might not be able to explain the source of our anxiety. So another person who's not scared of spiders might think, what's wrong with you? You know, it's just a little creature. It's tiny compared to you. What's wrong? But actually, we just know that they don't make us feel comfortable. And the same for children who are anxious about speaking. They might not understand why it is or what makes them feel that way. There's a lack of confidence. And it can lead to poor long-term friendships. So there are long-term consequences of an ongoing anxiety about speaking, and it may lead to frustration and other mood changes. So quite often children might seem fine at school during the day, and then there may be behaviour issues when they're at home because actually they've had that sort of pent-up anxiety all day about how they feel. And it can cause conflict in a family over whether a child is being stubborn or difficult or what they can or can't do. So there are some other long-term consequences. But it's about thinking about how does this child feel, what's making them feel anxious, what makes us feel anxious, and then we can start to empathise a bit with where they're coming from. Because for most of us, social speaking, such as maybe getting up and speaking in front of a large group of people, may make us anxious, but actually speaking socially on a day-to-day basis with people that we come across doesn't make us feel anxious. So we've got to find that point of empathy with those children, that actually for them this is quite a big deal. So what does it look like? So for all children with selective mutism will present differently, but have one thing in common: they cannot talk in certain contexts or with certain people. So for some children, that may just present itself in school, but for many it also presents with extended family, trips to the shops, speaking to friends at the park. Then there will be other situations. They'll have difficulty maintaining relationships because they might not want to initiate that contact, or friends might walk away if they don't seem to get a response, or people give up. And that can lead to withdrawal, isolation, frustration, and other anxieties. There might be other areas where a child is showing anxiety. And it can lead to a lack of independence because they rely maybe quite heavily on a parent to engage for them. They can look quite stubborn or naughty or defiant, which actually isn't the case, but that's how their behaviour can present, because they will try and get out of certain situations, or they'll withdraw or put their head down or avoid eye contact. So it can be misconstrued. There's two different types of selective mutism. There's low profile selective mutism, where a child manages to speak a little bit. They might nod their head, they might gesture, they might give an answer, but they wouldn't initiate or talk freely. And then there's high profile selective mutism, where children are completely black and white. It's a cut off. They don't speak in that situation. I don't open my mouth and I won't say anything. I don't think it really matters if you distinguish which is which. It's worth looking at children individually as to what situations they do feel comfortable in, or in what ways they do feel comfortable engaging with you, and then which situations are particularly difficult for them. Causes. What is the cause of selective mutism? There is no single cause. And because it's an anxiety disorder, it's something that might just develop over time, or the child might show early signs of anxiety in different situations. No one has caused that problem, and there isn't ever a single root cause that we can find. However, there are some maintaining factors, and we can, as adults, accidentally reinforce some of those behaviours with children. So the child links communicating or speaking outside their immediate family to unpleasant feelings. So they might feel some of those physical reactions to fear, which can be feeling sick, it can be feeling very uncomfortable, not being able to sit still, or freezing, any of those anxiety reactions. And then they will just cut off and be silent. We then remove that need to speak or interact, and they feel a lot better. And then that sort of gets that negative reinforcement of, oh, that situation was horrible, so I won't put myself in that situation again. And that kind of reinforces that behaviour for the child. We don't mean to do this, but unwittingly, when we put pressure on children to talk and engage with us in ways that make them feel uncomfortable, then we are strengthening these associations. So, yeah, what are some of the things that we need to avoid? We don't want to talk negatively in front of the child. So if we name some of their problems about them without discussing it with them, oh, he doesn't talk in school, oh, he won't talk to his grandma, and we say those negative things in front of them, then we're reinforcing that image of that child that they can't speak. We don't want to pressurise children to talk. Are you going to talk today? Go on, you're not having any crisps unless you ask for them. And by putting that pressure on, the child feels more anxious, more nervous, under pressure. They just want to get out of that situation and avoid that additional pressure. And we give a negative association when we assume they're being stubborn or rude. So actually the child's in a situation where they may need to communicate and they get negative feedback from us because they're refusing or they've put their head down and we've acted in a way that makes it seem like we're cross or upset with them. What are some of the statistics about selective mutism? It often starts in the early years, so there will probably already be signs of selective mutism before a child starts school. It can be caused by trauma or life changes, but I think it's very unusual to spot a specific incident that has caused something like selective mutism to start. But equally, we know it's an anxiety disorder. So if a child has had lots of changes in their early years or significant events, then that may be one of the factors. Roughly 1 in 140 children at primary school will have selective mutism, which means as a teacher you are likely to come across this once or twice within your teaching years, particularly if you've been teaching for a long time. You will come across it a few times. It is more common in girls than boys, and we believe this is due to being an anxiety disorder and that being more prevalent in girls. However, that's possibly changing, and we may need to consider whether it's just as common in boys as girls. So what is the role of the speech and language therapist? Our initial role is to assess where the child is at. So we will gather background information from the home and the school about the child's speaking habits, about any possible maintaining factors, so other behaviours that people around them are doing, anything that particularly triggers their anxiety, or any situations they feel particularly comfortable in. If we can, if the child engages with us, then we will assess what their language comprehension skills are like, so how well they understand instructions and questions, what their expressive language skills are like, or their speech sound development, so how well they communicate, and what their general social skills and engagement are like in a situation where they do feel comfortable. So sometimes children will engage perfectly well with us on a one-to-one situation, but other times we do have to expect that children with selective mutism may not want to engage with someone they've not met before. But we can still provide input and advice, and we'll very much listen to the input that parents and teachers will give us. So what do we do? What is our role? So we will work as part of a multidisciplinary team to assess, observe, guide interventions, monitor the child's progress, and then review. That multidisciplinary team is parents and carers, extended family, if they want to be involved, teachers and teaching assistants, and sometimes includes clinical psychologists from Young Minds Matter, who we might use to consult and discuss with children with complex anxiety disorders. We'll assess the child for any possible underlying speech and language difficulties that might be causing additional anxiety. What we don't do is we don't come in and work one-to-one with that child on a regular basis, because actually for children with selective mutism, they need to build up those relationships and those communication skills with people that they interact with on a daily basis. So that's teachers, other children, family members. They don't necessarily need to have a good relationship or a speaking relationship with their speech and language therapist. Actually, we're there to advise on supporting communication with others around that child. So we would rarely offer regular one-to-one intervention. However, we will offer advice and guidance to others. We will help with planning and providing strategies, and particularly a small steps approach, which we come to later on in this video. We will give information about building the child's confidence, social skills and assertiveness, and we provide training, such as our video today. And we can assess a child's progress and review where they are at with their targets. And we may consider making an onward referral, particularly to Young Minds Matter, because they're specialists in helping children with anxiety disorders. So what intervention do we need to put in? Early intervention is key. As with most difficulties with children, the sooner we can help, the better. Make sure everyone who's supporting a child is aware of which strategies work for that child and their role in supporting them. And this requires really good collaboration between home and school. The most important thing that people can do, a very first step, is to get to know the child really, really well, knowing as much about them as possible, either through talking with parents and family members, or just getting alongside them, finding out what they enjoy, what they respond to, what they like doing, what gives them confidence, things that they enjoy, all those positive aspects of how that child is doing is really important. And there's no replacement for the time that that takes. So we all know that time is in short supply, but actually the time taken to get to know a child really well will have that positive impact later on. So we start with environmental changes. We are not expecting the child to change. We're expecting that those around the child put in those environmental changes to make sure the child is as comfortable and secure as possible. And then we will consider a targeted small steps intervention. So what are the environmental strategies? First of all, get to know the child really well. I've put that on again. It is a really key strategy. Reduce the pressure on the child's talking. So whilst we are all keen to hear what that child's got to say, actually the more pressure we put on, the more negative feelings that child experiences. We actually need to find ways to get alongside that child that engages them, makes them feel welcome and secure, but has no pressure on talking. So that's going to include things like, don't ask direct questions, don't put children on the spot, actually get alongside, do an activity together. Build up that rapport with the child with a key adult within the classroom, but that might mean taking them out and doing some one-to-one activities or getting alongside them, particularly during activities that don't require high levels of communication. So doing a craft activity together, doing some colouring, building with Lego, playing a game together. There's lots of things that you can do that don't require lots and lots of talking. And actually the child can join in with and have fun with without that pressure to speak. Don't use too much language yourself or overcompensate. So actually, if you're playing a game together, although you might chat all the way through it, do feel free to show the child that it's okay to be quiet. And that might mean you modelling being a little bit quieter or using less language yourself. Accept and encourage all forms of communication. So if the child chooses to sign or gesture, point or smile to show how they're feeling, then accept those forms of communication and interpret them for the child. Oh, I can see you're really happy about that. Or, oh, you showed me this. Don't feel that you have to wait until the child speaks to respond. Use comments rather than questions. So instead of saying, oh, what did you do at the weekend? Try, I hope you had a nice weekend. I enjoyed going in my garden. And then if the child wants to respond or just smile, then they're not under pressure to talk. Same if you're playing a game, rather than, oh, what number did you roll? You could just go, oh, I rolled 2. And give space for the child to reply or join in if they choose to, but there's no pressure that they have to. You may need to leave little gaps and silences in order for them to join in. If you're like me, you can find silence a bit uncomfortable, but it's learning that actually 2 or 3 seconds silence maybe gives the child time to respond either verbally or non-verbally, rather than us filling all of those seconds. Don't assume the child has nothing to say. Oh, leave some pauses so that they can talk if they choose to. It might just take them a little bit longer. So exercise 3, get your pen and paper ready again. I think this is the last exercise as part of this video. There's a scenario. Imagine you're supporting a child at PGL, one of those week-long activity holidays, who's scared of heights and would like to join their classmates having fun on the high ropes, but is too scared to join in. What would you do to support this child? What would you avoid doing? Pause the video for a few minutes and just write down your answers. So hopefully you've had a chance to think about that. And probably quite a common scenario if you're a year 5-6 teacher and you've taken children to a PGL course. So if a child is scared to go on the high ropes, what are you going to do to support that child? Hopefully you came up with things like, oh, don't worry, watch the others, see if you'd like a go later. Maybe you want to go up with a friend. Maybe you'd like to just go up halfway and see if you like it and see how you go. What are you going to avoid doing? Well, hopefully you're not going to tell them, oi, get up there. That's what you're supposed to be doing, off you go. Otherwise you're in trouble. So hopefully you're not going to get cross with them. Hopefully you're not going to make fun of them. Oh, are you too scared? Are you a bit of a wimp? You can't do that. So hopefully you're not going to do anything like that. Hopefully you're not going to get their classmates to put pressure on them. Come on, tell Billy he's got to come and do this. Actually, we want to provide that supportive and encouraging role. We don't want to put those negative pressures on the child about consequences that might happen if they won't do it. Okay. So some additional strategies for school staff. Hopefully that just puts you in the picture with that PGL scenario of how we then want to respond for children who have got communication difficulties. We want to provide that supportive environment. We don't want the child to have those negative consequences of not communicating. So acknowledge that the child's got a difficulty. So actually with the PGL scenario, you can say, oh, I know you're a bit scared of heights. That's okay. I've been a bit scared of heights too. So we might want to say, oh, I know talking can be hard sometimes. Oh, it should get easier. So we can acknowledge the child's difficulty. We do need to give them a little bit of extra time. They might just need a little bit of time to think about whether they want to join in or not. We may want to consider eye contact. So actually putting direct eye contact on children can put them under a little bit of more pressure as well. So just consider that. And consider the environmental factors. The child may respond better in a quieter or calmer space rather than when it's busy or noisy. So even that example of the child on the high ropes, maybe with everybody around, they're just a bit too scared, but maybe if they just went up with you and a friend, they'd have the confidence to do it. Be careful with praise with children with selective mutism. We do want to reward children for good communication, but they don't need lots of fuss. These are children that don't really like to be centre of attention and can feel like everyone's watching them. So actually, if they do communicate, we don't want to be too over the top in the way that we respond to that. Oh, yay, Billy spoke, well done. That's a little bit too much. We just want to go, oh, that's really nice, thank you. And encourage that, but in quite in a positive way, but not necessarily in an overly exuberant way. And then finally, do things with rather than for the child. So these are children that will often lack independent skills because they're frightened to try things by themselves. However, if we do things alongside them or with them, then actually we can praise them for things that they've tried and had a go at. Oh, there is another exercise. I think this is the last one, so you will need pen and paper again. And it's about the communication load on children. So there's lots of activities that we do in schools, and some of them will require quite a high communication load on what's expected of the child, and some will be a lower communication load. So your next exercise is to rank these different communication tasks: answering the register, making a choice, retelling a story, asking for help, counting from 1 to 10 and answering a topic question in order of what you think are the least to the highest communication load. Pause the video for a few minutes and have a go. Now then, here's our answers, but we might not be exactly right. Okay, so just because these are the order that we've ranked them in doesn't necessarily mean it matches for that child. So we would think making a choice, do you want red or blue, as fairly easy. The child may point or just use a single word. So we wouldn't consider that to have a high communication load. However, if it's something that's quite a big choice for that child, that's quite important to them, that could be more tricky. Counting from 1 to 10, well, most children who are confident in counting, actually that's not necessarily a difficult task, and they've not got to think too much about what they want to say. It's something that everybody says and everybody does, so that should be an easier task. Answering the register, well, it depends what they've got to say. It's just yes, miss, that might be okay. However, it can be quite a high communication load for children because everybody's watching and they feel under pressure. So it's less about what they've got to say as much as the situation that they find themselves in and the fact that they feel embarrassed. And it's worth considering if there's another way for that child to join in. Can they put their hand up? Can they nod to you? And maybe everybody in the class does the same so that that child doesn't feel left out. Asking for help, again, that can be quite small or quite big, so it can be quite a big thing for children to ask for help and explain what it is that they want help with. However, if they've got quite a discreet way of doing that, just putting their hand up or putting a little symbol on their desk to show that they're stuck, and then the teacher comes round and helps them individually, then that perhaps feels okay to the child. If they've got to ask for help in front of everybody, that's definitely going to be a lot more difficult. Answering a topic question, such as what do plants need to grow? That's quite a difficult one for children. They've got to explain something, they've got to give a longer answer, and that's much harder. They've got to think of their own ideas. It's not a set way of speaking. They've got to generate those thoughts and ideas for themselves, which they're probably more than capable of doing, but then that's extra pressure to articulate those. And finally, retelling a story. That's always going to be a lot harder, but children might be willing to do that writing it down or through pictures, but that has quite a high communication load. So they're all the environmental strategies that we would put into place, and we would want to ensure that those are fully in place and adults are implementing those consistently before moving on to a small steps approach. A small steps approach isn't suitable for all children with selective mutism, but if there is a good amount of staff time available in school, then you may want to also try implementing a small steps approach. So this is recommended for children with high profile selective mutism if there's key adult support available in school, but it could also be for a child with low profile selective mutism. It's about putting in such a graduated approach that we go from a situation where the child does feel reasonably comfortable, even if they're not speaking, and then gradually as the child makes progress with the amount of communication they give, be that verbal through speaking or non-verbal communication, then we gradually increase what that situation looks like and what that task includes. So you will need to identify a key adult in school who can spend small periods of time one-to-one with that child to build a rapport. For most children, this will be one-to-one in the classroom, maybe outside of the classroom with a special friend, or in a special room. The child might feel comfortable alongside another friend, or the child might feel comfortable just one-to-one with that key adult. Spend time getting involved in activities that do not have any pressure on speaking. So we talked before about games or craft, but there is those opportunities to maybe take turns and build interaction together. When the child shows that they're comfortable and happy in that situation, so you can see that they're keen to come with you, they look happy, you can see that in their body language and their facial expression, then you might start to look for signs that that child is engaging more. That could be just that they are smiling more or nodding or more willingly taking turns, that they look physically less frozen, because some children will look physically quite frozen, but actually they look more dynamic and they're engaging more. Or it may even be that they start to use occasional words quietly with you. The key thing is to ensure that the child looks forward to these sessions. It's something they see as enjoyable and fun and really positive. Then you start to implement those small steps. So it might be, if a child's engaging well with you in that situation, that maybe another adult just pops their head round, has a look what you're doing, just comes in and sees what the child's doing for a few minutes. okay? Or maybe they even sit on the edge and they're busy doing their own work, they're typing up some reports or something, but they're in the room, and the child gradually becomes confident at maintaining the interaction that they were enjoying, even though there's another adult present in the room. Then the adult might just watch or have a look at what's going on, make occasional comments. Maybe another child comes and joins in with those activities. Choose carefully which child that is. Those that want to take over or speak constantly might not be as suitable. Maybe another child that's a little bit quiet or is a good friend to the child with selective mutism. Or maybe you take those activities that you've been enjoying together in your special room and in your special time, but you have a go at doing it in the classroom, maybe while the other children are out to play or something like that. So the child gets used to enjoying that interaction, but in the classroom setting rather than away in a different room. And so on and so forth. So I'm not going to go through the whole of that. If you were implementing a small steps approach and you wondered which step to take next, that's time to either look on the Selective Mutism website for some advice or contact a speech and language therapist who is possibly working with the child with selective mutism or has been given advice previously to ask what the next steps might be. So what to expect next? So when we're implementing strategies for children with selective mutism, give the child at least 3 to 6 months to build up a trusted relationship with someone in school who they can feel relaxed with, and time to make sure that all the adults within school are implementing those environmental strategies. Give yourself time to build up that trust, try those strategies and try those small steps approaches. And if the child is still under a speech and language therapist, we'll typically review the child's progress every 3 to 6 months. We'll see what's working well, what's not working well, and give advice. But we will discharge the child. We don't maintain our input as an ongoing thing throughout their childhood. Once schools and parents feel confident in the strategies that they're implementing and learn the approaches, then we will discharge that child from our caseload. So you may have some questions. Please do email us on nlg-tr.gy childrenstherapyteam@nhs.net. You may want to pause to write that down. It is a secure email, although it may be best in the first instance if you just email a generic question to us rather than about a specific child, unless they're on our caseload already. And always check with parents that you have their permission to come to us to discuss any concerns that you might have. Just a reminder, if you want some more information about selective mutism, there is the BBC production, Help Me to Speak, Selective Mutism, which is available on YouTube. I would highly recommend even just watching the first 5 or 10 minutes of part 1, which gives some really good examples of 2 children with selective mutism. And visit the website www.selectivemutism.org.uk, which does have lots of advice leaflets and additional information, and I do believe they have a helpline as well. I really hope you've enjoyed watching this video today. We would really welcome your feedback on whether this was a useful training video and anything else that we could have included or ways to improve. But we really appreciate your time in taking to help children with communication difficulties. Thank you.